Good afternoon. I was literally just checking whether or not we've already got Scott with us. But before we see him remotely, welcome back to another session this afternoon here on the Travel Forward stage. This is with me live and with Scott Wilson dialing in from America. Scott is Executive Vice President and President of Sabre Hospitality Solutions. And Scott and I are going to be talking about Sabre's vision to create a new marketplace for personalized travel by providing the technology and services to enable any channel to sell personalized travel content. So I hope that we are going to see Scott with us in a short while. Hi, Scott. There you are. Welcome to Travel Forward.
Pleasure to be with you.
Yes, it's
Thank
wonderful.
You very much.
It's wonderful to have you here. And I know that you had plans to travel over, but it's still early days. And we hope that maybe for the next live event here in London, you will be with us in person. But for now, welcome.
Thank you very much. As it turns out, there still is something called a common cold. So despite all of our defenses against COVID-19, apparently you can still get other illnesses as well. But on the mend, and do hope to be in London very, very soon. In the meantime, it's a pleasure to be with everybody virtually, if not live.
Indeed. We're glad to have you here in this new way and format as well. Now, Scott, before we dive into sort of the main areas of the topic around personalization in travel, you have more than 25 years experience working with a number of international and global organizations. And what I think we'd all like to know is the road that took you here and how you ended up with Sabre. Really, the whole journey from start to where you are now will be quite interesting to hear from you, please.
Well, I hope I don't startle anyone when I start my story at age 5, but I promise I won't go through each year along the way. But I think it's important to start there nonetheless. I actually grew up in a family where my father came from fairly modest background and really was inspired to travel when he had the opportunity to do so. And I remember taking my very first trip on an airplane. I was age 5, and I'm from San Francisco, California originally. And we were going to be taking a trip to Hawaii, which of course everyone has heard about, but at the time I hadn't been. And I remember I was sitting next to the window of a 747-200 plastered against the window watching as this big, beautiful airplane took off from San Francisco, lifted in the air, and transported us into a place like no other. And it was from that moment on, I knew somehow, some way, I was going to have travel as part of my future. Did not realize it would be such a major part of my career, but really from working within airlines, working within hospitality companies, it's really been kind of my mission to help bring digital transformation to the travel industry. And now I have that wonderful opportunity to do so here at Sabre, where we can try to continue to drive this incredible experience for more people in a more real and meaningful way.
Absolutely. Well, conversation or after that initial experience on that aircraft. With your Sabre hat on, tell us a little bit about your challenges and the opportunities as you see them for the travel industry right now.
Well, certainly it doesn't take long to point to one of the biggest challenges that the travel industry has. But I actually don't think it's that important to focus too much on COVID-19 as far as what it's going to mean for the long term. You know, as you mentioned, I've been in the travel industry on and off, mostly on for the last 27 years, and we've had our share of ups and downs. It's a cyclical business. Without exception, the travel industry comes back and always exceeds people's expectations for what a rebound can mean. So I continue to be incredibly bullish about the future of travel. What has been interesting, however, is that the pandemic has really forced a change in consumer behavior and consumer mindset around what they expect digital capabilities to provide to them. And if you look at most industries, they were forced to embrace digital in a way in order to just survive and carry on during the pandemic. And yet travel industry has had technology for quite some time. But really, I would say consumers got used to a level of personalized experience, service delivery that they hadn't been required to accept or embrace before. Once they did, it's something they didn't want to let go. And I think one of the biggest challenges that the hotel industry has now is how do they deliver that same level of personalized service and experience and retailing that consumers now almost demand. And that therein lies the very opportunity for Sabre and importantly for the hotel industry. And this applies to the travel industry at large. But I would tell you that the hotel industry is broadly behind. And I say this as someone who's been in the hotel industry on the brand side, is broadly behind in being able to deliver this type of personalized experience. And I know it's one that the hotel industry wants to do, but that is really where the opportunity lies for the hotel industry specifically. And consumers will embrace that.
Can you elaborate a little bit more specifically around Sabre's plans here when we're talking personalization in the travel industry? We spoke about it on the AI panel this morning, also where we had Sundar from Sabre represented alongside some other experts in the AI sector. But talk a little bit about how the personalization aspect applies to our industry and why we are lacking behind, and what Sabre is trying to do to get us to the forefront.
Absolutely. Sundar is actually a very good partner of mine. I'm glad he was able to make it over. If you actually think about, there's a line that we used to use when I was in the airline industry. I used to say we were data rich, but insights poor. I've evolved that line a little bit. I think most of the hotel industry is data rich, but activation poor. And if you really look at what's going to unlock the ability for hoteliers to use the data they have about their guests, it's being able to reach in and find that data, understand that data, leverage that data so they can start to predict and anticipate what it is that a consumer is going to want in the future. And that is exactly what Sabre, using the Synexus platform, is working very rigorously to bring to the market. I was watching the slideshow before we got on here, and we talk at Sabre broadly about retailing, distribution, and fulfillment. And really there are three main parts of what the consumer journey is and how hoteliers need to meet the consumer in that journey. When you're retailing, can you bring an offer forward? Can you bring something forward to them on a shelf that allows them to say, this is exactly what you will want next? Then can you distribute that? And that means both to your own channels as well as to third-party channels. And certainly in Europe, the intermediation space is an important part of the travel shopping experience. So can you take that offer and send it to the third-party travel agency to represent on your behalf? And then lastly, and most importantly, once that guest shows up on property, can you remember and fulfill against that service delivery and offer? How many times have we been to a hotel where we think we have asked for something, only to find that there's no recognition or recollection of this thing that you thought you had requested, reserved, or purchased? It's that whole journey that the Synexus platform is bringing forward. And any hotelier, whether you use Synexus or not, needs to think about whether they're meeting each of those three markers and has the tools and capabilities to do each of those steps.
So given what you have told us so far, what do you think that this next stage of travel technology looks like? I mean, where does the how can I best put this? But where do we see this actually evolve? Because we have been talking about digitalization in travel for a long, long time, and we're still somehow lagging behind. I think, again, we touched on this morning in terms of data sets and how we actually drill down into those data sets. But tell us, what do you think that this next age of travel technology looks like?
I'd say there's really two parts to that answer. And if you really, I don't know how many hoteliers are actually in the audience or will be watching this, but whether it's a hotel industry, the airline industry, many of these technologies, in fact, let's not forget that travel companies were some of the earliest adopters of technology. It was originally designed as an efficiency play. Some of the original global distribution systems originally started from the airline industry. So these are 40, 50, even sometimes 60-year-old systems.
Yeah.
And the way technology evolved from that point were via point solutions. Said differently, it's how can they find the best in breed solution for some particular task? That was fine in its day, but what it lacked is an ability to actually connect the dots. So as a consumer is interacting with these various technologies along their journey with a hotelier or an airline, what's happening is that the information is stored within that one system, but it doesn't carry forward into another. Well, that's fundamentally broken for the way you're going to be able to need to leverage information to carry that journey from beginning to end. So hoteliers are going to have to go through this very difficult decision, but it's required now by the consumers are expecting you to know them better because they're seeing this in so many other places, and that goes to the second part of this of kind of what does it look like. I don't know how many people here are on Netflix account. Hopefully, many of you do.
Probably quite a
Netflix
few.
has. Yes, I was going to say that was probably an easy guess right there.
Yeah.
But if you look at Netflix's catalog, they have tens of thousands of pieces of content for you to consider. Now, I remember the not very old days where I would go to my local cable provider or television provider, and they might have a list of movies that you could rent, but it was done alphabetically or it was done by genre. And it was up to me to actually have to go dive in and find that information. And what Netflix is able to do is, as they learn your viewing habits, they can start to figure out what they should elevate to you. So now my homepage on Netflix probably looks very different from yours, Charlotte. Now imagine a hotel being able to do something very, very similar. There are any number of things that they could offer as an experience for me when I go to that property. But as they start to learn my experiences and they understand what my preferences are, rather than making me go into their website or talk to my travel agency, what if we could elevate those experiences and bring them forward so that Scott Wilson is actually starting to see only those things that are relevant to him or interesting to him. Now, we know this works because where we've done this in other areas, like we've done in the airline industry 10 years ago, we actually know that the adoption of those additional retailing opportunities goes up. And importantly, and this is something that's often missed, is the guest satisfaction goes up as well. The correlation between buying additional ancillary services and products goes hand in hand with my overall satisfaction with that journey. That's what the future of retailing needs to look like, because it's not just about making money for the hotelier, it's actually driving the consumer satisfaction and experience on property and over travel.
Yeah, I mean, I personally certainly, Netflix certainly knows what I like to watch, and I'll be very glad on the day when I don't need to tell the hoteliers exactly the same information that I've basically been trying to give them or tell them for the last 10 years. And it seems like we are getting closer. What, and I can almost guess what your answer will be, but what results do you expect to see from this transition now that we can finally say technology is going to help the hospitality and the travel industry to make more sense of the data that we have available to us? Because it's high time, I would say.
Well, there's actually a couple things you're going to see, and I'm going to start with the hotelier's benefit first. So what hoteliers have long been searching for is a way to create a stickiness or a relationship with the guest. I don't want to be seen just as another box, as another place that you can spend the night because you're on your way to some destination, and this happens to be the city where you've stayed with me before. But what is it that makes you feel like you shouldn't stay anywhere else? Because the more I stay with you, the more you understand about me, the better service you'll be able to deliver to me. So what happens is that the hotelier is actually able to create a stronger linkage, which creates obviously greater lift for that particular property. I'm going to talk about something that has long been true in the hotel industry. Many people may not stop and think much about. Most hotel revenue growth has been come through the expansion of properties or room keys. In other words, the more I can add another property, I can grow my top line. As a hotelier, that's a successful model. Another way to think about hotel performance is actually on a same-store basis. Retail uses this all the time. They use a same-store improvement. In the hotel industry, we talk about RevPAR, revenue per occupied room or per available room. The new way to think about this is total RevPAR. And now hoteliers are going to have to think about how to get maximum revenue and return out of each existing property. And the only way to do that is to create more demand for that same property and get more lift off of each guest that stays at that property. That only again comes from being able to actually better understand customers and deliver a personalized experience and retailing experience for that property. So really when you go back to kind of this mantra of retail distribution fulfillment, what we're doing at Sabre Hospitality Solutions is providing a toolkit that's unified, again, back to this point of no longer point solutions, that allows you to understand your customer, move them through that journey, understand that data, and so the next time that person comes back through, I'm already a step ahead in being able to do that better than last time, driving total RevPAR.
Okay, so there's quite a lot of artificial intelligence in there as well, of course, as we learn to make more sense of all of the data. When we spoke last week, we talked a little bit about the various platforms that are kind of shaping all of this. I was wondering if you might be able to elaborate a little bit on how hoteliers can sort of benefit from leveraging these different platforms.
Absolutely. Now, there are a few different key pieces that hoteliers need to think about adding. All hoteliers have some sort of reservations platform. All hoteliers have some sort of property management system platform. These are operationally critical and important. They are insufficient to meet this future journey or stage that we're talking about. And for those of you who participated in the AI panel this morning, Sundar likely talked about, I apologize, I missed it. It was a little early for me here in Chicago. He probably talked about something called a recommendation engine, or Synexis, Sabre Travel AI. Yeah, and the idea is that we have this data and it's stored somewhere. There is no possible way that humans, you can have as many analysts as you want on your team pouring through all this information, trying to understand what is it that Charlotte likes versus Scott likes. What did we show to Scott this time, and what did he accept or reject? And how do we learn from that and do something different next time? So having a recommendation engine or some sort of travel AI that you can apply to this data unlocks this ability to actually put forward onto the shelf something that's truly curated for Scott. Now, sometimes AI, ML, machine learning, artificial intelligence, these are phrases that are bandied about like it's something really easy to do. Well, it actually is getting somewhat easier in the sense that these tools are now much matured from where they were 10 some years ago. And there are now toolkits that are embedded into, embedded into our platform now. So it's no longer on a requirement of you, the hotelier, to figure out, well, what does it mean for me to do AI? So on the Synexis platform, for example, when you buy into our Synexis intelligent retailing capability, the artificial intelligence comes with it. So really, the hotelier doesn't need to think about, do I have to build a data science team to start applying these best practices? More and more, these are capabilities that come, quote unquote, out of the box, if you will. And really, the hotelier just needs to focus on retailing. What are the products? Who is my customer? How am I storing that data? And how am I feeding this data into these AI ML tools to do better going forward?
Again, when we caught up last week, we spoke about Sabre's vision to create this new marketplace. Is that something that you are able to elaborate a little bit on for those in the audience that have not necessarily heard so much about it?
Yeah, in fact, you're going to hear both. So Sabre Hospitality Solutions obviously supports the hotel industry, and then my colleagues over on the travel solutions side support the airline industry. Exactly. And collectively, we talked about the new marketplace. And really think about the new marketplace as the second and third parts of the retailing, distribution, and fulfillment. Apologies, the first two parts of that. So a marketplace is really where I, as a consumer, have easy and unfettered access to the best of what hotels and airlines have to offer. And so that really means there are two parts of it. Can the hotels and airlines create those offers in a meaningful way? And can they bring it forward both on direct channels, which has been done for quite some time, but here's the key, to indirect channels as well, so that hoteliers have the same quality and access to content and rich retailing offers that they would otherwise have. There is really no one in the marketplace today that is creating that sort of unfettered access to the best of what hotels and airlines can offer. That's what the Sabre marketplace is all about. And that's a very important mission. And oftentimes we talk about, well, how good is this for the consumer? Well, I hope I've been able to explain this kind of rich, more personalized experience that I'm getting on the Netflix of the world, that I'm getting on Amazon, that I'm getting in these other places can exist in the travel ecosystem. It must exist with these other tools and technologies, and it's required airlines and hotels to embrace these as Sabre and others bring these to the market.
We spoke this morning again, and it's been mentioned in other sessions and will be over the next 3 days, about partnerships. I find it quite fascinating, the partnership that we also spoke about last week with regards to Sabre and Google. So you have a specialist in the hospitality and travel industry with one of the biggest technologies companies in the world. Again, I'm hoping that the audience here would like to know a little bit more about that particular partnership, possibly. And can I just say that I will take some questions on Slido if there's anything that any of you guys would like to ask Scott as well. So don't be shy. Just let me know. I've got it here ready. There was one question, but it's disappeared. But if somebody can bring it back up, then I'll ask it of Scott in a minute. Thank you very much. Scott, so tell us a little bit about your partnership with Google.
Well, keep in mind, there's a couple things happening in kind of the technology broadly, which is this move to the cloud. And I know I'm talking in a technology forum here, but just really quickly. Obviously, the cloud actually gives a number of advantages. It takes a lot of systems off premises. It actually makes it highly redundant, highly scalable. And really, there are a number of players in the space, but we believe that there is no one stronger than Google in what they've done. I don't think it goes with any question that Google has really mastered the art of international speed, scale, stability, and reliability. And to be on the same backbone as Google's consumer products is incredibly special for us. And we have a 10-year partnership that we announced with them early last year. But importantly, and this is where I think there's also very little doubt, there really is no one stronger in the machine learning and artificial intelligence space than Google. So to partner with one of the best cloud providers on the planet and the leading AI ML provider on the planet, we think is an unbeatable combination. So with our experience and expertise in the travel ecosystem and Google's expertise on cloud platforms and AI ML, we really think that is a strength that no one else can match. And keep in mind, we're only in the very early innings. Sorry to use a U.S. baseball analogy there. We're only in the very beginning stages. How about that? Of working with Google, and it's been a wonderful partnership so far.
Wonderful. There is a question from the floor from Aaron, and that would be quite interesting for you to elaborate on in general. Really the question is, how do you work with travel agencies? We've talked a lot about the hotels and the airlines, but it might be interesting to hear a little bit about your relationship with the travel agencies.
Actually, if you go back to Sabre's earliest history, it really was in the global distribution systems, which is Sabre, actually semi-automated business reservation engine. Boy, I got to remember the Sabre acronym better there. We don't use it much. But actually, that really was a way to store reservations. And then Sabre was one of the first to create a dedicated computer console at the travel agency so they could do that. So the relationship and the history is significant. But there's an important question behind the question, which is, in order for this distribution piece of retail distribution fulfillment to work, the intermediary players need to be similarly embracing of these new capabilities. I would say that there has been a very traditional view among many corners as to what distribution should look like and has looked like for quite some time. I know that I faced this when I was at United Airlines. I was responsible for distribution, actually, as one of my roles. And then here again, now at Sabre. There is a wonderful opportunity for everyone to participate in this new marketplace. It's going to take change from the hoteliers to bring in some new technologies and capabilities. It's going to take the travel agencies, a willingness to embrace these new technologies. And it's going to take the brands themselves and ultimately the consumers, that same sort of leaning in and understanding that change is necessary and very positive for all parties in the ecosystem.
Are you in a position to guide, shall we say, the travel agencies a little bit here? I mean, what is Sabre doing specifically to bring the travel agencies with them on this interesting journey?
Well, there are a couple things, and I'm going to speak from the airline side because it's a little bit more mature of a process. So NDC, for next generation distribution capability, is something that's been bandied about for quite some time. The argument behind it has always been about creating a richer set of information that can be shared along the way. So bringing NDC to market is something that Sabre has been behind for quite some time. We're going to have to see similar sorts of approaches for the rest of the travel market. NDC is somewhat airline specific. Hoteliers, as I mentioned at the outset here, are a little bit further behind on having a pan-industry sort of coordinated effort around what that's going to look like exactly. But that same journey that the airlines are going through and still going through is one that the hotels will have to do as well. And Sabre often puts itself in the position of acting as a, I wouldn't say a moderator, but as a participant in the definition and distribution of these new standards to enable this rich shopping and service delivery experience.
I think it's incredibly important that exactly that companies like Sabre, they actually help all of the various suppliers along these very interesting journeys as they come. We have another question, which I guess is a little bit around sort of bespoke content. Where will it be best? It says here, where is it best to place to sort of show bespoke content and offers? And this is it's another question from Aaron. I guess really in and around, how do you best get your offers out there and get seen? I don't know if you, Scott, have sort of specific feedback on that.
Well, again, I don't know, Aaron, thank you for all the questions, but I don't know if you're from a hotel specifically, but I'm going to speak more directly to the hoteliers right now, which is on your own channels is the easiest way to start. That's where you have the most control over the entire ecosystem of that experience. This is not to dismiss the distribution piece we were just talking about, but if I'm a hotelier, I want to think about this in how do I crawl, walk, then run. I'm going to focus on existing assets. They can be policies, by the way. Oftentimes we talk about retailing, we forget that we can be talking about policies. Late checkout, early check-in. These are things that actually can bring some real value. Business travelers have a different need for those things, and being able to elevate those on your own channel and being able to fulfill on them is a great first step. We tend to think about things that are more aspirational, like it's maybe tickets to a show nearby or a restaurant reservation. Those are wonderful opportunities as well. They take a little bit more coordination. Now you have a third party involved. You have to think about the fulfillment of those things. But there's very much a crawl, walk, run approach. And keep in mind that when you work with technology providers like a Sabre, we're not just handing you the technology and saying good luck. There is very much a consultative journey into how to execute against this and get that real value. But to simplify the answer back down is focus on your own channels first, thinking about third-party channels subsequently. Focus on assets that you have today, thinking about new assets you'd like to bring later. And it's a very good way to get going and have some real results. I will just add one thing. We did do a pilot program of our new intelligent retailing platform with a hotelier in Hong Kong. They actually were able to grow their total revenue for stayed guests by double-digit % during the pilot program by being able to bring existing assets onto their website and selling them in a way that they hadn't been able to do before. So it's a very real lift for a hotelier who wants to embrace this approach.
Thank you, Scott. There is another question from the floor. I guess with all the talk for quite a long time around NDC and in the airline industry, this is really around, does Sabre, does the industry, that's maybe much more broadly for the audience, but is the industry working on an NDC type solution for hotel standards? Scott, to your knowledge, or are we creating it sort of bit by bit here?
Well, and I'm going to pull back a little bit from NDC specifically and from a hotel. Well, I'll start with the direct answer. As far as I'm aware, the hotel industry is not working on an NDC corollary. Ultimately, it's less important as to whether there is a governing body that creates a standard or whether a standard is de facto created. Let's remember that a lot of the early internet technologies weren't necessarily created by a forum. They were created by companies that had a great new idea, put it into market, and other people embraced it, whether it be HTTP or HTML or JavaScript or things of that nature. These were often technologies created by a company. We actually have a mechanism by which we can have hotel information shared And as that is brought into market, we hope that can become something that is a standard for the marketplace overall. We very much believe that that is an important part of the industry baseline and not something in and of itself to be monetized.
Cool. Well, setting standard is certainly very, very important. The industry has still sometimes, in my opinion, got a way to go. But there is one more really good question, actually, from Chris in our audience, I expect. What importance would you place on user-generated content, reviews and feedback when considering the personalization sort of piece for a hotel? Peace of mind, I suppose, is kind of one of those. Tell us a little bit about how important you find this aspect.
Well, you probably saw a smile grow across my face as that question came in. I'm going to take you back 14 years ago. I was actually at Marriott International in their headquarters, and I was asked to start lead the first social media team. This is trying to take you back to when that was. There was a time of when social media was new. And that's something that hoteliers have been struggling with for quite some time, actually. And initially, hoteliers were quite scared of user-generated content. You will always find negative. Generally speaking, and the data tends to bear this out, consumers like to see user-generated content. They are skeptical if they don't see a balance of commentary. So if you do, and I'm going to leave it as an if you embrace user-generated content, best practice is to bring it in its fullness, in its totality, and not to be either afraid of what's in there. Obviously, you need to filter for things that are inappropriate, et cetera, and there are tools to do that. But to go ahead and give a mixed set of information. Consumers in certain situations value those comments, especially when they're doing something around travel, where the experience is subjective, and they need to hear from a variety of sources as to how people feel about that.
Fantastic. If the audience finds this strange, initially I could see Scott in front of me on the screen, and now I sort of have to do like that. I don't even know if Scott can still see me, but just so you know why I'm moving backwards and forwards. And unfortunately, also it's a sea of black, so I can't really interact very well with the audience. Next year we're going to put a few little lights out there because I can just see two gentlemen here in the front, and that's all I have to work with. But we are coming to an end, Scott. The half an hour is literally up. What I would love to ask you, in conclusion, first of all, I hope you're going to be here in person next year. I'm sure everybody's keeping finger crossed that travel is now going to very slowly open and safely and securely. We can get things back on track with the environment in mind. I hope very much as well. So, Scott, when you join us, hopefully next year, what do you hope to tell us then that's not just a repeat of what you've told us today?
Well, let me start with a personal comment. I told you my father embraced travel as something he always wanted to do. So from the age of 12, I don't think I had missed international travel 1 year until the pandemic started. So for me to be able to get back and travel outside the United States again and visit London, one of my all-time favorite places, and why wouldn't it be, would be a blessing. I'd love to be able to do that. But look, obviously in a year's time, we do hope that even if the COVID-19 isn't gone, it's something we've learned how to deal with in such a way that everything is quote unquote normal, or at least the new normal, as people like to say. And really that means that it's really more about how do we actually take advantage of this new normal and really deliver something that hoteliers haven't been able to do before. I am a lifelong hotelier or travel fan. And as a customer myself, I do look at the hoteliers with a little bit of a finger wag. And again, I say this from someone who's been in it, not as someone from the outside who doesn't understand, and say, we can do better. We do have this content. We can unlock it. Let's do that now, because it's better for us as hoteliers. It's better for the consumer. And a year from now, what I hope we're talking about are those success stories, not just the what might be stories.
Wonderful. Well, I think on that note, we are going to look forward to a fantastic update on all of this next year. I'd like to thank Scott Wilson again for joining us today. I know Scott is available on all social channels, and if anybody wishes to reach out to him and have specific or further questions for him, I know he's a very approachable guy, and I'm sure that you will in due course hear back from him. So Scott, all the way from London to San Francisco, was it? We thank you for joining us. Chicago, that's it. Right. We thank you for joining us, Scott. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you again, everybody, for joining us. We will be back here just after 1 o'clock. No, sorry, we're way past 1 o'clock. My goodness. 3 o'clock, 3:15. I will be back here to introduce you to our next panel, where we are going to focus on the airline industry. So I hope to see you back in half an hour or so. Thank you. Bye-bye.